Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about that just a few days ago there was a very heavy explosion on the territory of this region, and just today, a few days later, we got reports that as a result of that attack, the Ukrainians lost up to 18 officers of the United Kingdom and some number of French soldiers. We don't know for sure what exactly they were doing on the territory of Odessa, but most likely they were responsible for the special operations that the Ukrainians were conducting with the use of the Navy drones in direction of Crimea. Now let's move further and let's move to the South Donetsk direction. We have additional changes on the ground. According to different sources, the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions in the northern direction of Mykolaiv, and the Russians managed to improve their positions along Solotka-Vodyane road. So these two bridgeheads were captured by the Russians, and as we can see, the Russians are moving closer and closer to the main supply road TO524. According to geolocations that we received during the previous days, the Russians have already cut this road at least in one part between the coal mine and this stronghold that located on the intersection of the roads between Vodyane, Solotka and Ugledar-Konstantinovka. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Maximilianovka. Just yesterday we were talking about the videos that were published by the Ukrainians of how they were FPV droning the Russians in the central part of the village, which confirms, this video confirms additional Russian progress on the ground. And today more military experts and more neutral or pro-Ukrainian mappers have adjusted their maps and confirmed the information about additional Russian progress inside of the village. So the Russians are pushing. There are still a lot of job to do. The Russians control just around 30% of the village, but the distance from edge Russian positions till the end of the village is already less than 3 kilometers. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Krasnogorovka, and today we got additional updates. As you can see, we have adjusted the map because we received geolocations that confirm additional Russian progress in the western and northwestern directions. In this video that was published by the Ukrainian sources, we can see the series of FPV drone strikes on the Russian forces in this side of the city. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map, and 3 strikes were geolocated. First strike took place here, the second one here, and the third one here. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction. We have additional updates from the artillery pocket between Progress, Vovche, Evgeniivka. First, according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions further in the western direction and capture additional tree line that located to the southwest of Progress. This small area was captured by the Russians. This information was provided by neutral mappers. Furthermore, we have additional updates from pro-Russian sources. According to them, during the previous night and during the previous 24 hours, the Russians continued their offensive towards Vovche, and during the previous few hours the Russians were making a lot of attempts to storm this territory from the north, from the village of Progress, and from the east, from the village of Evgeniivka. According to information we have, the Ukrainians decided not to fight for this territory and they start withdrawing process. So let's wait for additional updates. If this information is correct, today we're going to receive additional information and maybe we're going to make some changes on the ground. We stopped receiving any updates about Novoselovka Persha. We have just one video that was published by the Ukrainians, by the forces of 47th Mechanized Brigade, of how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians inside of this area, inside of the school. So this territory was already colored as the territory under Russian control, so nothing special, nothing new, and we've been expecting for some clashes in the southern part of the village for many days, but still no updates about any progress or any activity either of the Russians nor of Ukrainians in this part of the city. Now let's move further. If you remember, just yesterday we were talking about the Russian attempt to attack the village of Tymofiivka, and we reported there was a video published by the Russian sources, and today we got this video. Let's take a look at this video. In this video, for example, we can see the Russian tanks, armored vehicles, at least 1, 2, 3 armored vehicles that were heading to the west from Vozdvizhenka towards the village of Tymofiivka. In this video, it's very difficult to understand whether the Russians managed to achieve some results or success. We know just for sure that the Russians were moving in this direction, but we don't know for sure where exactly the Russians managed to get, where the Russians were stopped by the Ukrainians and so on. Anyway, this video is enough for us to adjust the map. As you can see, we have colored this territory under complete Russian control. We have colored Lozovatsk under complete Russian control, and we believe that the Russians were moving further in the west-northern direction. Probably, according to that video, the Russians were stopped somewhere here. Anyway, the battle for Tymofiivka has started. Most likely during the next week or even by the end of this week, this village will be captured completely. Now let's move further to New York agglomeration. We have a lot of very interesting updates from this territory. First, let's discuss some changes on the ground. According to pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions further in the northwestern direction along this tree line. As you can see, according to these changes on the map, we see the Russian focus where exactly the Russians are moving. Currently, the Russians are trying to establish complete control over this stronghold. There are two forests in this area and some additional tree lines. Now let's move to Petrovska Gora. As you can see, we have a lot of icons in this area. The Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were counterattacking the Russians inside of this part of New York. In this video, we can see personnel carriers, that Bradleys that arrived very close to the Russian positions. We can see how the Ukrainians landed in the area. We can see how the Ukrainians began clearing the territory and getting deeper in the, let's say, closer to the Russian positions. So how the Ukrainians were moving from one building to another, trying to clear the area, trying to understand where exactly they can take defense and hold positions. If we return back on map, we can make a conclusion, we can make some interesting notes. So for example, the Ukrainian Bradley was operating along this street, along this line, and they were attacking the Russian forces in this building, in this part of Petrovska Gora, and the Ukrainians were attacking the Russians in this part of Petrovska Gora. Furthermore, according to this geolocation, according to this video, one of the Ukrainian Bradley, or maybe the same, gets this. It's the street of Voinov Internationalistov, and from this position, the Ukrainian soldiers, Bradley was attacking this building. So based on this video and based on these geolocations, we have adjusted the map and we have colored the entire Petrovska Gora under almost the entire Petrovska Gora under complete Russian control. During the previous 24 hours, during the previous night, more precisely, we haven't received any further update about the situation with the Ukrainians who were encircled by the Russians in this part of New York Toretsk agglomeration. Now let's move further. Considering the battle for the central citadel in Pivnichna, today we have also adjusted the map. The Russian sources published the video, unique and rare scenes of how the Russians were storming the Ukrainian positions in this part of the city. In this video, we can see significant number of Russian soldiers who were moving from the south in the northern direction. As you can see, there are Russian soldiers, some group of soldiers, stormtroopers, were moving from one building to another. They were running for a very big distance, and this video confirms Russian control over significant number of buildings, constructions, and different facilities that located along Stotmichenko Street, along in the vicinity of Unity Street, and along the central citadel of Pivnichna. So based on this video, we have adjusted the map, and according to this video, this territory is currently colored as the area under Russian control. So once again, the Russian soldiers, the Russian stormtroopers were moving along this line, and somewhere in this direction, the Russian troopers entered the citadel itself. So this is the road of Russian attack, and based on this road, we have adjusted the map. Now let's move further. Let's talk about these northern directions like Kupiansk and Kharkiv. As for Kupiansk direction, yesterday some pro-Russian sources reported that the Russians established complete control over the village of Sinkovka, and later the same sources reported that they made a mistake. Sinkovka is still under complete Ukrainian control. Maybe the Russians managed to enter the northern part, maybe the Russians managed to capture additional buildings. Anyway, there are very heavy clashes. For example, in this video that was published by the Russian sources, we can see artillery attacks on Ukrainian positions, and after another artillery attack, the Ukrainian soldiers began withdrawing their positions towards more reliable, let's say, areas like Petropavlovka or Kupinsk itself. Summarizing the situation, we can make a conclusion that Sinkovka still hasn't been captured by the Russians, but this situation is in process, and maybe during this week or the next one, the Russians will do this. So we just need to wait and to get more patient. Now let's move further in the direction of Kharkiv, where we receive also significant number of updates. There are still very heavy clashes in the northern part of Volchansk. We have additional videos of how the Russians were bombing the main Ukrainian supply roads. As you can see, according to geolocations, by the 23rd of July, we stopped receiving any geolocations from inside of the citadel. The Russians stopped bombing this territory, and the focus is moving further in the southeastern direction, which confirms that maybe the Russians did establish complete control over the citadel or about to do this. We have additional updates from Gluboka. According to information we have from different sources, from Western sources, the Russians during the previous days or hours managed to restore complete control over the farms that located in the north of the village of Gluboka. So this territory from now on is under complete Russian control or is in the gray zone. The Ukrainians were forced to fall back towards the northern part of Lviv for regrouping and maybe to prepare before the next or one more attempts to attack Gluboka itself. The Russians stated that during the previous night they made significant number of Iskander and aviation strikes on Ukrainian positions in the northern Kharkiv direction. The Russians destroyed the temporary position of the 92nd Mechanized Brigade. The sources are saying that currently the 92nd Assault Brigade have already lost its combat capabilities, and some battalions of this brigade have the losses of the level of 50% or even more. Now let's talk about political events, and of course during the previous night more and more surprises we received from the United States of America. Very interesting and very difficult situation. We have a lot of rumors. For example, today we have one rumor that Joe Biden has experienced a severe hypertensive crisis with the suspicions of a stroke. Currently he is in a closed clinic in Delaware where doctors are treating him under non-disclosure agreement. Jill Biden stated among friends that Tony Blinken has become the main betrayer and source of information for their enemies, the Pelosi Clintons. We expect Blinken's resignation soon. The White House has already prepared a draft document outlining the transfer of the presidential duties to Kamala Harris. So there are very heavy clashes between political elites of the United States of America, not just between Democrats and the Republican Party, but also between people inside of Democracy Party as well. So very interesting situation. Obviously there are going to be more and more updates and more scandals with the political system of the United States of America. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.